There's a moment before sleep that most people overlook. It's not just the end of the day or a pause between action and rest. It is, in truth, a portal. In that space between wakefulness and dreams, the mind softens, and the subconscious awakens. Science refers to it as the theta brainwave state, operating between 4 and 7 Hz. It's a frequency of deep relaxation and hypnotic receptivity, the same state accessed in moments of meditation or under hypnosis. But unlike those deliberate practices, this moment arrives naturally and inevitably, every single night. Most ignore it. The awakened use it. Carl Jung, in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, wrote that the unconscious is not a dumping ground of forgotten experiences, but an intelligent system, alive and in communication with the conscious mind. This is crucial to understand, because the images and emotions you choose to plant in that intelligent system right before you fall asleep become the blueprint for the electromagnetic signature you emit, your vibrational field. And this field is what shapes who and what you attract. Not from force or manipulation, but from frequency and resonance. You are not rewarded by the universe, you are reflected by it. This is where the power of intention intersects with the science of brainwaves, because when your conscious mind becomes quiet and your subconscious steps forward, there is no longer resistance. There's only absorption. What you visualize becomes encoded. And the language of the subconscious is not logic, it is sensation, it is emotion, it is image. So when you lie in bed and you visualize the absence of someone, when you imagine them not calling, not coming, not caring, you are not just noticing a reality, you are reinforcing it. You're turning pain into programming. To shift this, the key is not more wanting, the key is coherence, that internal harmony where your thoughts, your emotions, and your energy are all aligned in the frequency of already having. The woman who wants to shift her energy lies in bed with reverence. She places her hand on her heart and breathes with presence. With every exhale, she lets go of control, and with every inhale, she draws in certainty. She closes her eyes and she sees him, not as a fantasy, but as a memory. She smells his scent, hears his voice, feels the pulse of his presence around her. It's not desire, it's embodiment. Her body reacts as if it's real, and so, vibrationally, it becomes real. Jung said in Man and His Symbols that the dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul. But this door doesn't only open in the night. It opens in the quiet willingness to believe that the unseen is more powerful than the seen, that what we emotionally rehearse becomes our vibrational identity, and that our identity shapes our experience. This is not superstition. This is not wishful thinking. This is the deliberate use of the brain's most receptive frequency combined with your emotional intelligence. What begins as a visualization becomes an energetic rehearsal. And what is rehearsed often enough, with emotional clarity and conviction, begins to sculpt not only the body's frequency, but also the subtle electric field around it. In that way, reality stops being something we chase and becomes something that is magnetized to our presence. This is not about believing in fantasies, it's about embodying the state of already being. Because the universe does not respond to begging, to fear, or to lack. It responds to clarity. It responds to certainty. It responds to truth. And the deepest truth is the one you feel before sleep. Each night, this practice is not a duty, it is a sacred appointment. The bed becomes your altar, the silence your temple, and in this sacred space you do not try to control what someone else will do. You become the version of yourself that they would naturally gravitate toward. The true power of manifestation begins when imagination meets emotion. Most people imagine their desires, but few allow themselves to feel them with enough intensity that their body starts to believe it's real. That's the missing link. The subconscious doesn't respond to vague thoughts or passive wishes. It responds to the combination of repeated imagery and the deep physical experience of those images. When a person lies down at night with the intention to visualize, the key is not to try but to feel, to enter a sensory reality where the desired experience becomes a memory instead of a hope. The body must respond, the heart must open, the nervous system must soften in recognition, This is what reprograms the subconscious, not because you're asking the universe to give you something, but because you're training your inner self to believe that it's already yours. So let's break this down. Imagine her lying in bed, lights off, phone silenced. She breathes slowly, deep in, deep out. She's not visualizing because she's desperate. She's visualizing because she knows this is her time to activate a different frequency. She doesn't start with a face. She starts with a feeling, a warmth in her chest, a soft ache in her stomach that signals excitement, not fear. She lets that feeling grow, and then slowly she introduces the image of him, not through effort, but through connection. She brings in every detail, the texture of his shirt under her fingers, the smell of his neck, the exact tone of his voice when he says her name. She sees his eyes, clear, fixed on her, but more than that, she senses his energy. And that energy is familiar, magnetic, soft and strong at once. And here's the shift. She's not yearning for it, she's inside it, she's not wishing. She's remembering. That embrace already happened. That conversation already flowed. That smile already met hers across the table. She even hears the notification sound of the message. She picks up the phone. It's him. The words are simple, but they're charged. I've been thinking about you. And in that moment her body responds, not with surprise, but with deep peace, because this was the timeline she chose, the vibration she anchored. She whispers to herself, "Thank you, this already happened." And when she does, something softens. The old self who chased, who doubted, who longed, she dissolves. What remains is presence, certainty. Jung once said in Psychological Types, that intuition gives outlook and insight. It revels in the garden of magical possibilities. And this practice of visualization is intuition made physical. It's not empty fantasy, it's directed energy. And like all energy, it moves, it touches the field around you, and in that field, everything responds. To go even deeper, she begins layering not only visual and auditory sensations, but kinesthetic ones. The weight of his hand in hers, the rhythm of two bodies breathing in sync, the softness of a shared blanket. These are not images, they're sensations. And sensations have memory. The more real it feels, the more permanent the programming. She doesn't visualize in silence only. She speaks, not out loud, always, but within. She says, "You miss me. You're feeling me right now. You want to come back." Not as a command, but as a certainty, because this is not about controlling another person. It's about aligning her energy with the timeline where that desire is fulfilled, with ease and clarity. She smiles, not because anything happened in the external world, but because everything happened in the internal. And when you master the internal, the external has no choice but to echo. This practice becomes her sanctuary. Her place where the outer world doesn't dictate her emotional state. A place where memory, imagination, and emotion become indistinguishable. That is the language of creation. She's not obsessed with when or how, it's already done. That's the tone she sleeps in. That's the frequency her body emits. And night after night, as she returns to this space, something begins to shift. Her mood lifts, her energy stabilizes, her dreams become more vivid, and eventually the bridge between imagined and experienced becomes so thin she forgets which was which. That's when it arrives not as a miracle, as a match, because magnetism isn't about force, it's about coherence. And coherence is born when the inner experience becomes so stable, so emotionally complete, that the outer world begins to reconfigure itself to match. There's no space for obsession, no room for fear, just the confident, calm energy of someone who already holds what they once chased. She doesn't wonder if it's working. She knows it is. Her signal is clear. Her emotional body is steady. Her subconscious night after night becomes more fluent in the language of connection. This isn't just visualization anymore, it's calibration. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all, she's not doing it to make someone come back. She's doing it because it makes her feel alive, connected, whole. The return when it happens will just be a reflection, not a reward. a mirror to her inner atmosphere. This is what most people miss. They visualize to get something. She visualizes because it anchors her in her power, and when someone feels that kind of energy, they remember it, they feel it, and without knowing why they are drawn back. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because the field between them has been tuned again. The song has returned to harmony. There's a subtle enemy that lives in the energy of almost everyone who tries to manifest love, reconnection, or attention from someone else. It's not always loud. It often hides behind affirmations, intentions, and even spiritual practices. But its presence can be felt, and the universe responds to it immediately. That energy is lack. Lack is not just the absence of something, it's the emotional charge of not having. It's the moment when she visualizes the message coming in, but deep down she thinks, what if it never happens? It's when he imagines the embrace but feels the ache of distance. That tiny, quiet doubt contaminates the entire vibration. And the subconscious, always listening, encodes that emotional frequency as truth. Not the image, not the words, but the feeling beneath it all. People often ask, why am I doing all the right things but nothing's changing? The answer lies in the emotional quality of their vibration. Are they imagining from desire or from certainty? Are they rehearsing love or reinforcing emptiness? Carl Jung wrote in The Undiscovered Self, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. When you try to manifest from a place of fear, need, or absence, you unconsciously resist the present moment, and by doing so, you amplify the very thing you're trying to avoid. The person feels it, even from a distance, because energy doesn't lie. No matter how pretty your affirmations sound, if your vibration screams, I don't have it, that is what gets projected. To shift this, you must train yourself to think and feel from the version of you who already has what you want. This doesn't mean faking confidence. It means developing emotional fluency, feeling, embodying, and trusting the experience you've imagined until it no longer feels imaginary. You do not beg the universe. You meet it with certainty. She learns to catch herself. When the thought of absence arises, she doesn't judge it. She breathes into it. She says, I see you and I choose something else. She returns to the scene where they are together. She lingers there. She adds more details. She anchors her body in the vibration of arrival, not longing. This is not spiritual bypassing. It's energetic discipline. And every time she does that, she rewires her nervous system. Her body begins to associate love with presence, not pain. With ease, not effort. With fulfillment, not waiting. Slowly but surely, the energy of lack begins to dissolve. The shift is not just mental. It's physiological. Her breathing changes. Her posture shifts. Her eyes soften, and those around her can feel it. She's no longer emitting the frequency of choose me. She's living the frequency of I am already chosen. The magnetic field of a person who no longer vibrates in need is unmistakable. People turn toward it without knowing why. It's not loud. It doesn't demand. It simply exists in truth. And the truth, when felt fully, becomes undeniable. She is no longer vibrating from hope. She is vibrating from arrival. And this shift, though invisible, changes everything. It changes how she walks into a room. It changes how others feel in her presence. It changes the texture of her thoughts. Because when the subconscious finally believes that love is already here, the external reality has no choice but to conform. That is the irony of energy. When you no longer need it, it flows. When you release the grip, it returns. This is not passivity, it's presence. It's trusting the timeline your energy is shaping behind the scenes. It's understanding that the delay is not denial, but preparation. So she keeps showing up, not to chase someone, but to become someone. Someone who no longer waits to be chosen, but chooses herself so completely that anything else becomes a bonus, not a necessity. And from that place, love doesn't just return. It recognizes her, because she's finally recognizing herself. Morning is not just the start of the day. It is the recalibration of your energetic field. What happens in the first few seconds after waking sets the tone for your entire vibrational output, and when you're in the process of attracting, reconnecting or magnetizing someone back into your orbit, those first seconds are golden. Before the mind kicks into to-do lists and obligations, before the hand reaches for the phone, there's a small space where you're still between worlds. That's your moment of access. And just like the theta window before sleep, this one holds immense power. If nighttime is where you plant, morning is where you water. This is where you reinforce the timeline you chose the night before, not with effort, but with emotional precision. She doesn't jump out of bed. She stays still, eyes closed, breathing. Her body remembers. The visualization from the night before is still floating in her field, and now it's time to amplify it. She replays it like a memory. She doesn't try to recreate it. She receives it, and as she does, her nervous system begins the day aligned with the energy of already received. That's the frequency that attracts. She places one hand on her heart and whispers, "Thank you, I'm already remembered." She smiles softly and affirms, "He feels me today. My energy is in his field. He will think of me." Not from craving, but from knowing. These affirmations are not empty. They are encoded with certainty. Her voice carries the tone of someone who is not asking. She is confirming. Carl Jung, in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, emphasized that every morning is a chance to make contact with the unconscious anew. And in this contact, she doesn't beg, she aligns. She chooses thoughts that support her identity as someone who is loved, remembered, and desired. Not in the future, but now. These are not mantras for motivation. They are recalibrations. Each one tells the body, "This is our truth today." She rises not to search, but to embody. And as she moves through her morning, brushing her teeth, making her tea, looking in the mirror, she carries that energy. Not perfectly, but intentionally. If a moment of doubt arises, she doesn't panic. She places her fingers gently on her necklace, her anchor, and breathes. 10 seconds. That's all it takes to return, to remember, to reconnect. Her mornings become a silent ritual. The world may think she's just waking up, but vibrationally she's tuning her signal. And like a radio tower that stops switching frequencies, she holds steady. And that steadiness, that's what sends the pulse. That's what reaches them wherever they are. Not words, not actions, but vibration. There is a difference between waking up and becoming conscious. Most people wake into habit, into repetition, into reaction. But she wakes into creation. Each breath she takes is a quiet declaration. I am still connected, I am still magnetic, I am still chosen. This mindset spills into her presence. When she texts, she's not grasping. When she scrolls, she's not comparing. When she walks, she's not searching. Her energy speaks before she does. It whispers, "I already have what I came for." And this energy doesn't just influence her, it affects those connected to her field. There's no need to overdo it. The most powerful rituals are the simplest. She keeps a small journal by her bed. In the morning, just a few sentences. Last night he felt me. This morning he woke up thinking of me. I am present in his awareness. She doesn't write wishes. She writes confirmations. Each word a gentle but firm reminder to her subconscious. It is done. This is how she reclaims the first few minutes of every day. Not by controlling the outcome, but by mastering the beginning. Because the frequency you start with often dictates what you notice, how you react, and what you draw in. The outer world begins to bend in the direction of your internal tone. She doesn't need a sign to believe. She becomes the sign. Her peace becomes her proof. Throughout the day, it's easy to drift. Doubt creeps in. Thoughts of absence resurface. The mind starts asking when, how, and what if. That's why one of the most powerful tools in energetic alignment is the use of a physical anchor, something you can touch, feel, or activate to bring your vibration back into coherence. She wears a pendant around her neck. It's simple, maybe, unnoticed by others, but for her it's not decoration, it's declaration. Every time she touches it, she doesn't just remember him. She remembers the version of herself that already has him, not out of fantasy but out of emotional imprinting. The gesture is subtle, 2 fingers pressed gently to the metal, a deep breath in, a soft exhale. In that moment, she doesn't beg. She doesn't ask. She aligns. The anchor becomes her reset, the signal that it's time to return. 10 seconds. That's all it takes. She breathes, she closes her eyes, and she sees the scene. The message lighting up her screen, the shared laughter, the look in his eyes. She doesn't try to force it, she re-enters it. She lets her body feel it again. The nervous system remembers safety. The subconscious accepts it as truth. Carl Jung once said in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, the symbols of the self arise in the depths of the body. And that's exactly what this anchor becomes, a symbolic bridge between her physical presence and her energetic identity. She doesn't need to wait for the perfect moment or the ideal setting. She could be at work, in traffic, or standing in line. All she needs is a breath and a touch to shift timelines. The beauty of this practice is that it bypasses mental chatter. You don't need to convince yourself intellectually. You just feel. And feeling is faster than thought. Feeling reaches the field. Feeling transmits the pendant, the breath, the image, the knowing. It happens in seconds, but the impact lasts much longer. This is not superstition, this is somatic reprogramming. When the body begins to associate a physical gesture with a specific emotional frequency, that gesture becomes a shortcut, a vibrational code. Over time, the anchor is no longer just a tool. It becomes identity. It becomes home. She doesn't limit this practice to moments of doubt. She uses it even when she feels good, especially when she feels good, because that's how she teaches her body to stabilize in elevated emotions. She touches the anchor not just to recalibrate, but to amplify, to stretch the frequency, to expand the field. Eventually, her brain begins to anticipate the shift. Her breath deepens without effort. Her chest opens. Her mood softens. The gesture becomes a gateway, not a reaction. And that's the goal, to respond from energy, not emotion. To move from the vibration of having, not wanting. To let her body lead her back to wholeness again and again, until the feeling becomes her default. She might pair it with a phrase, something private, almost like a whisper to her own soul. He feels me now. We're already aligned. It's already unfolding. These aren't affirmations to change reality. They're echoes of an inner truth. And with repetition, they become vibrational signatures that speak louder than any action. Even if no message comes that day, she knows the connection was made. She knows energy was transmitted. And most importantly, she knows she stayed in alignment. That becomes the new metric of success, not the outcome but the state. Not what she receives but how she remains. This is how the anchor turns into an extension of her power. It's not about control, it's about coherence. When the energy within matches the vision she holds, the outer world has no choice but to respond in resonance. Carl Jung taught that the self is not only the center but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, ion, and through this tiny intentional act, touching a pendant, breathing, remembering, she embodies that totality. She becomes the self that already is. Some people pray, others journal, but for her, writing became something entirely different. It became quantum. A portal to the future lived through the present emotion, not as a wish or a plea, but as a declaration. This already happened. This is my truth. This is my timeline. Each night before sleep, she opens her journal not to ask, but to affirm. She doesn't write from lack. She writes from presence. She picks up the pen and enters a state of emotional embodiment. And then she begins. Today, he reached out to me. It was unexpected and beautiful. His words were soft and sincere. I felt his presence even before the message arrived. The words don't come from fantasy. They rise from feeling, from belief, from inner memory. The subconscious reads this language fluently. It doesn't ask if it's real. It accepts the emotion behind it. And emotion is how you speak to the field. Carl Jung said in Psychological Types that what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. And writing is how she brings her desires out of the unconscious fog and into form. It gives shape to the unseen, direction to the energy, certainty to the vision. She doesn't stop at one line. She builds a full scene, the tone of his voice, the warmth in his words, the energy in her body when she read them, the tears in her eyes, the smile that wouldn't leave. She writes it not as a script, but as a memory. Her memory. Not imagined, but recalled from the body's knowing. The page becomes her altar. The ink becomes her imprint. And in this ritual, something shifts. She doesn't need signs. She becomes the evidence. Her heart calms. Her energy expands. Her frequency locks in. And night after night, the gap between thought and form, feeling and fact begins to dissolve. She writes slowly, deliberately. Each sentence is a spell. Each paragraph, a vibrational imprint. She doesn't rush. She allows herself to feel the truth of every word. The story she's telling is not a fantasy, it's a confirmation. It's already real in energy. Writing it makes it real in form. And as she writes, she smiles. Sometimes she cries, because the body doesn't know the difference between an event imagined with intensity and one lived. So it responds. Her breathing slows. Her chest softens. Her field expands. She may write, "He held me like he'd missed me forever. I felt his heartbeat. I saw it in his eyes. He never stopped feeling me." Or, "We laughed together, like nothing had changed, like we always knew we'd find our way back." These moments aren't conjured. They are channeled, not forced. They are allowed. And that surrender is what makes them powerful. Carl Jung said in the Red Book, "The soul speaks in images." And when she writes in the language of emotion and imagery, she speaks directly to that inner world. She's not scripting a manipulation. She's harmonizing her vibration with her highest timeline, not to make something happen, but to live from the truth that it already has. Sometimes she reads her entries aloud. Her voice becomes part of the encoding. The vibration of sound adds another layer of transmission. Other times, she falls asleep, with the journal pressed to her chest, letting the energy of her written words sink deeper into her field. This is not about superstition. It's about signaling. It's about intention. It's about alignment. Her journal holds pages of fulfilled futures, evidence of the quantum self she has already become. And the more she writes, the more she believes. And the more she believes, the more reality obeys. Not because she chased it, but because she became it, first in ink, then in energy, then in life. At the root of all magnetic energy lies one simple truth. A person who deeply loves themselves becomes irresistible, not because they try, but because they don't need to. There's no chase, no lack, no desperation in someone who has come home to themselves. That's the kind of energy that draws others in, not through force, but through frequency. She used to think that if she looked perfect enough, gave enough, waited enough or suffered long enough, love would find her, that someone would notice, that someone would finally return. But the moment everything began to shift was the moment she stopped trying to be chosen and chose herself instead. Choosing herself wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It looked like long pauses in front of the mirror whispering, "I see you." It looked like no longer explaining her worth, no longer shrinking to be tolerated. It looked like walking into a room and not scanning for who would accept her, but asking, "How do I feel about being here?" Self-love became the standard, not the goal. Carl Jung, in The Development of Personality, wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And yet she did, bit by bit, day by day. She replaced the noise of "Am I enough?" with the truth of "I am already whole." And as that truth settled into her body, the patterns of unworthiness began to break. She stopped waiting to be called beautiful. She began calling herself divine. She stopped wondering if someone would text her. She started asking if she felt aligned with who she was becoming. This wasn't about pride. It was about power, the quiet kind, the real kind. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself because its presence already speaks. Self-love, when embodied, is the highest vibration. It's what tells the universe, I don't beg for what I deserve. I receive what matches my frequency. And when that becomes your norm, everything shifts. Because now, the relationship is not about filling a hole. It's about sharing overflow. She began looking into her own eyes each morning and saying, "You are worthy of devotion. You are worthy of love that doesn't need proof." And in doing so, she stopped performing and started simply being. Her walk changed. Her voice softened. Her energy thickened with peace. The longing didn't disappear overnight, but it lost its grip, because when you stop waiting for someone to reflect your worth, you begin to shine on your own. Now, when she speaks to herself in the mirror, she isn't trying to convince herself. She's remembering. She's aligning. She says, "I am not incomplete. I am not forgotten. I am magnetic because I love who I am becoming." And that love radiates. It doesn't push. It doesn't chase. It pulls from a place of grounded certainty. People around her begin to notice. They can't quite explain it, but they feel it. Something in her presence says, "I am enough." And that presence is magnetic, not in a way that begs to be seen, but in a way that reminds others of what real presence feels like. Carl Jung believed that wholeness comes not from perfection, but from embracing all aspects of the self. And that's what she did. She held her doubts with compassion. She honored her wounds without letting them define her. She stopped waiting for someone else to validate her beauty, her brilliance, her being. She took it back. Self-love is not a destination. It's a frequency, one that must be tuned to daily. And in doing so, she stopped trying to attract love. She became love. And when that happens, the kind of person she once longed for begins to feel her in a different way. Not because she needed them, but because she no longer did. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. No affirmation, no visualization, no journaling, just presence, just breath, just being. Each day, she gives herself 5 minutes to sit in silence. Not to manifest, not to imagine, just to feel. No music, no goals, no inner script. She closes her eyes, places her hand on her heart, and simply notices her body, her breath, her energy. And in that stillness, she stops asking, stops reaching. She allows. This silence is not emptiness. It is density. It's where the energy settles, where the mind opens, where the subconscious integrates all she's planted. She doesn't fill the space. She honors it. And within it, something sacred happens. The body begins to glow with trust. The mind slows. The field stabilizes. Carl Jung said in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "In each of us there is another whom we do not know." And in this daily silence, she meets that other. The deeper self. The magnetic self. The one who already knows. The one who doesn't chase because it already is. In the silence, there's no resistance. No stories to untangle. No emotions to fix. Just awareness. And awareness, when held long enough, becomes coherence. It sends a signal into the field. I am safe, I am whole, I am enough. She doesn't try to stop her thoughts. She simply watches them float by like clouds. She doesn't grip or judge. She returns again and again to the breath. Over time, this simple act of stillness becomes her sanctuary. Her nervous system begins to crave it. Her thoughts become gentler. Her reactions slower. And most importantly, her vibration stabilizes. She no longer clings to outcomes. She doesn't wait for signs. She becomes the sign. The calm in her presence becomes the very magnetism she once chased. She notices the paradox. In doing less, she becomes more powerful. In not trying, she becomes irresistible. Because silence is not passive. It is magnetic. It is the field in its purest form. The moment she surrenders all effort is the moment the universe leans in. Most people visualize their desires as something ahead, far away, waiting to be earned. But she discovered something different, something powerful. She began to visualize not a future but a memory. She didn't say, "I want this to happen." She said, "It already did." And in that shift, everything changed. The brain doesn't know the difference between something vividly imagined and something physically lived. It records the emotional imprint, not the timeline. So she started remembering what hadn't yet happened. She walked through her days thinking, that message he sent, wow, it felt so good. She replayed the hug they hadn't yet shared. She smiled at the memory of a conversation that hadn't happened, but already lived in her cells. This isn't delusion. It's alignment. It's teaching the body to respond to a frequency as if it were already here. And when the body believes, the field follows. Carl Jung, in Synchronicity, wrote that we must give up the idea of causality if we are to make sense of the interconnectedness of the psyche and the world. That's what she tapped into, the deep, non-linear fabric of reality where thought, emotion and energy create timelines, not in sequence but in vibration. She stopped waiting. She started remembering, not hoping, recalling. And her emotional body, trained night after night, began to accept those memories as her truth. And that's when life began to echo them back. Each time doubt appeared, she didn't argue with it. She returned to the memory. She said, remember how he surprised me with that message, or remember the way we laughed like nothing had changed. These weren't affirmations, they were recollections. And slowly the subconscious adapted. It replaced waiting with welcoming. It stopped projecting into the future and began anchoring into the now. Her dreams became more vivid, her intuition more precise. She could feel him thinking about her. Not because she was forcing it, but because she was no longer blocking it with disbelief. She allowed the possibility to become presence. And the universe, responding not to her words but to her certainty, began moving. She realized that when you think something is far away, you unconsciously delay it. But when you live as if it's already yours, you shorten the gap. The energy quickens. The manifestations respond. This practice became a loop of emotional time travel, a sacred rehearsal of a love already returned. There's something profoundly powerful about hearing your own voice speak the truth you want to live. Not in whispers, not in hope, but with strength, with conviction, with presence. That's why verbal affirmations, when done with emotion and embodiment, become more than just words. They become activations. She records her own voice saying things like, I am magnetic, I am unforgettable, he feels me, he wants me, he remembers me. But she doesn't just say them flatly, she speaks them as if she were describing a fact. Her tone is calm, grounded and certain. No begging, no longing, just truth spoken in advance. Carl Jung said in Psychology and Alchemy that words are powerful symbols of archetypal realities. So when she speaks these affirmations, she is not creating something out of nothing. She is invoking an inner archetype, the woman who is already loved, already desired, already remembered. And it's not just about what she says. It's how she says it, with her chest open, her breath steady, her gaze focused, because the body listens even more than the mind. And when your posture says, I'm chosen, your voice begins to match. She plays her recordings as she falls asleep. The last thing her subconscious hears before drifting into theta is her own voice declaring alignment. This repetition isn't mechanical. It's emotional. It's vibrational. And over time, her field begins to hum with those truths. She doesn't just use affirmations in private. Sometimes when she's alone in her room, she stands in front of the mirror and speaks directly to herself, eye to eye, no filter, no mask. She says, you are not forgotten. You are felt. You are being called in. And as she speaks, something shifts, not outside of her, but within her, a spark, a resonance. Her voice becomes the tuning fork of her soul. She notices how some phrases land deeper than others. I am irresistible stirs something in her belly. He's thinking about me now warms her chest. My energy is unforgettable electrifies her spine. These sensations are signals, clues from the body that the words are being received. Affirmations, she realizes, are not about forcing belief. They're about creating familiarity. The more often she hears herself say the truth, the less foreign it feels. The less her mind resists. The more her energy aligns. She even sets reminders on her phone with her favorite phrases. Short, potent bursts of power. When they flash across the screen, she reads them out loud. He can't stop thinking of me. I am in his heart. My energy calls him home. These are not demands, they are recognitions. She's not begging the universe. She's claiming resonance. Carl Jung believed that speaking activates archetypes, and archetypes live in all of us. So when she says, I am the beloved, she awakens that pattern within. She doesn't speak to be heard, she speaks to remember. And some nights when her energy feels low, she doesn't fake it. She sits with her sadness, places her hand on her heart and says softly, even now, I am worthy. Even now I am felt. This honesty makes her voice even more powerful. Because it's real, because it's rooted. Affirmations become her ritual of remembrance, a daily practice of energetic hygiene. And over time, they shape not only her thoughts, but her field, her posture, her choices. She stops asking, will it work? And starts asking, am I aligned? And with each repetition, she moves closer to her truth. Energy doesn't only live in thought, it lives in the body. And one of the most powerful centers of emotional and magnetic energy is the solar plexus, the space just above the navel, beneath the ribs. This is where self-worth lives, where confidence is stored, where attraction begins. Each day she places her hands gently on this area. She closes her eyes. She breathes, not shallow and quick, but deep, slow, present breaths. As she inhales, she imagines golden light flooding her core. As she exhales, she releases any contraction, any tightness, any fear. She doesn't try to feel powerful. She lets the breath awaken the power already there. Carl Jung, in Symbols of Transformation, described the body as a vessel through which the psyche speaks. And in these quiet moments, the solar plexus speaks clearly. It says, you are safe, you are strong, you are magnetic. The heat in her belly rises, the breath becomes a pulse. And with each round, her field expands. She imagines that golden energy rippling out of her core in waves, not demanding, not grasping, just emanating. Like the sun, stable, consistent, and undeniable. Her presence becomes warmer, her posture more open, her energy radiant. This is the difference between chasing attention and emitting attraction, between needing and being. She uses this practice before important conversations, before stepping into a space where her energy matters, or simply when she wants to return to her center. The solar plexus doesn't ask, am I enough? It declares, I exist and I am powerful. It doesn't seek validation. It emits clarity. Over time, this breathwork becomes more than a routine. It becomes an energetic signature. She starts to feel her presence entering a room before she does. People notice something different. She hasn't changed what she says. She's changed what she radiates. And that makes all the difference. She pairs the breath with intention. My power is soft and unwavering. My energy attracts what's already mine. I radiate certainty. She doesn't chant them, she feels them. The body absorbs, the field responds. This is not performance, it's embodiment. Jung believed the soul doesn't speak through intellect, but through symbols, dreams, and sensations. And in these golden breaths, she doesn't think her way into magnetism. She breathes her way there. She didn't become magnetic by chasing, by scripting the perfect message or waiting for a sign. She became magnetic by returning to herself, again and again, until the vibration of love, presence, and certainty was not something she reached for, but something she lived in. And that's when everything began to change. Magnetism isn't about perfection, it's about coherence. When what you feel, believe, and emit are aligned, reality has no choice but to respond. It bends not to your will, but to your frequency. And she no longer vibrated from absence, she vibrated from truth. Carl Jung once said in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And in this journey, she didn't just become more attractive, she became more herself. That was the real power. She no longer feared silence, she honored it. She no longer resisted waiting, she used it. Every moment became a chance to deepen, to root, to remember. And as she did, the person she once longed for began to feel her differently, Not because she reached out, but because her presence reached them. She didn't try to pull someone back. She became the version of herself they could no longer ignore. Her field whispered what her words never had to say: I am already yours. Now she closes her eyes each night, not with hope, but with peace. She speaks her truth, she feels her breath, and she surrenders, not out of exhaustion, but out of trust. Because she knows the laws of energy. She knows that what is meant to return will find its way. And she knows she's already become a vibrational match to the love she once chased. Every technique, every breath, every visualization was never about controlling someone else. It was always about aligning with the deeper self, the part of her that was never lost, never forgotten, only buried under fear and longing. As she peeled back those layers, she met herself with tenderness, with reverence. She stopped waiting for the external to validate the internal. She began letting the internal shape the external. Her love became a source, not a search. Her power became a current, not a performance. She now walks into each day grounded in a quiet knowing: I am enough, I am remembered, I am felt. This energy moves before her. It enters rooms. It lingers in memory. It vibrates in conversations she's not physically part of, but energetically present in. When she thinks of the person she once missed, it's no longer with pain. It's with gratitude. Because that longing led her home. That distance led her inward. And from that space, true attraction was born, not out of fear but out of truth, not from scarcity but from sovereignty. She became a field of remembrance, not just for him, but for herself, for every version of her that once begged, waited, doubted. She became the embodiment of return, and now every day she anchors this new reality with one final ritual. She places her hand on her heart, breathes deeply, and says the mantra, not as a wish, but as a truth already unfolding. Everything I desire is already on its way. I receive it with gratitude, confidence, and love. I vibrate in the frequency of what is already mine. Because true magnetism isn't something you project, it's something you become. It's not a chase, it's a return. A return to your own energy, your own truth, your own center. And when you live from that place, nothing real can resist you.